Hello everyone, my name is Stephen Ty and I'm the Director of Tyware. We've been the developers of the MiWater system for Mackay Regional Council and most recently with Taggle Systems for the last 10 years or so. And it's my pleasure today to be able to bring you a new release of the MiWater product. Over the last couple of months, you may have heard that the name of the product is now to be changed to Aqualus water, and there's some reasons for that, which has no doubt already been explained, primarily around the positioning of the product name in international markets. But what we will be talking about today is a new release which focuses on some parts of the MiWater system that have been there for almost 10 years, the home dashboard and the property dashboard. And it's been our goal through this change to be able to make some improvements to things like speed and functionality, and most importantly to put some more interesting information in front of your eyes when you're using the Aqualus water product. We don't think there's likely to be much of an issue around training, mostly because the functionality and the user interface itself is still modeled on some design patterns that you have already been using. It's really just changing things like main menus and changing some of the charts and reports which are visible through both the home dashboard and the property dashboard. So without further ado, let's dive straight in. After we log in, the first things that we can take note of in this version of the product is that the header has been restyled and that the main menu, which previously was on the main area of the home dashboard, has now been positioned into the top menu. Now this actually isn't a large change. In the version of the customer portal of Aqualus Water, that's actually how it already appears to you. If you've used other products from Taggle Systems, such as the MySewer product, it also follows that same design paradigm. So all we've really done is shift the same functionality which was there before, but shifted into the menu structure which we've already been using as part of the customer portal. We see, of course, that there is the brand new name of Aqualus Water at the top there. We see that the main menu lists a number of options. All of the structure of the main menu is identical to what it was before. Some of these items you may not normally see as part of your typical usage of the Aqualus Water product, and that's simply because your user permissions may not have access to things like system configuration and user management. If you want to change your password or access information about the API, you can now see this under a separate second menu here where you can change those options for yourself. The other items on the main menu at the top here is we can see a logout button. We can also see help. Now the last option at the top, which we just overlooked a moment ago, is the search option. The search functionality in Aqualus Water has been completely redesigned. Amongst other things, it's been designed to run a whole lot faster than the previous search function did. But secondly, you can now perform a search by clicking on the search button and it will simply run that straight from the header. There's no need for you to then click back to the main menu to run that search. There's no need for you to have to leave the form that you're currently on. So that means you can do a very simple search by typing into this field something like a property address name, something like a meter code or an AMR code, or even a customer name you can put into this search field and it will do a quick search. The second thing we can see up here though is if you want to do a more detailed or an advanced search, you can maximize this search form by clicking on the maximize button to the right here. And when we do that, we see a much larger version of the form. This is a little similar to the form that you used to see on the front page of the MiWater product, but now there are a few extra options that you can search for, things like the classification of the water meters. You can search for things from rate types to schemes and other things that are in here, and some of those options previously weren't available. We'll just close that for now. I want to go back to the quick search, and all I really want to do here is I want to search for a property which is at Elm Street. So I'll just press in Elm and press enter, and this shows us our search results. Now when we do the search results, whether it's from the search function or the maximizer or the advanced search function, the results will be the same in terms of their structure and layout. What we'll also notice here though is that the results themselves includes a few more pieces of information that weren't previously there, such as we now see in here the data quality or data continuity, if you're familiar with that term. So if you've got a water meter with an AMR attached, or it's an integrated meter, and the data that is the transmissions coming from that are meeting your quality expectations, then you'll see 100% there, just like this one at 2 Elm Street. Or if there is no data being received because the data quality is poor, and again that just means that if it is transmitting, your network isn't receiving it, or MiWater, Aqualus water isn't receiving it, then you'll see 0 there. So now you can see that in the search function. In addition to that, you can also see the leak status if there is one for a product, for one of these properties. So we can see this one here actually has a leak. We can also see the 7-day usage as well to give you an indication of the consumption that's occurring at that property, all as part of the search function. You'll see as well as I scrolled that the menus themselves, or the headers for the menus, actually scrolled and stayed in place. And you can also reorder these items by either the leak size or the data quality number or the 7-day usage. So for just one of these properties, I can just click on select, and that will take me to the property dashboard. But I'm not going to do that just yet, because the property dashboard has also been redesigned, and we'll just stick for now for the home dashboard until we finished it, and then we'll show you that property dashboard in a moment. If I go up to search again, and I want again to search for Elm Street, I can also select the second option here, which is to do a map-based search. So after we've run our map search, our results are displayed. This is demonstration data. It's all been anonymized, which is why some of these map markers have been put into the river. But the functionality is the same, and will be the same for your instance of the Aqualus water product, where you've got the coordinates plugged in for your water meter installations or your properties. You will notice one thing too there, that when we actually loaded this report, the data appeared very quickly, and that's a number of performance improvements have been made to the search function so that they can run very quickly. We can select one of these properties simply by selecting the map marker, and then again going to the property dashboard by selecting it here. So as we return back to the home dashboard, another thing to make note of here is that the home dashboard is the most frequently used part of the Aqualus water product. Every time you return back to the home dashboard by clicking on the home button, which is in the menu, it needs to load a lot of data into your browser. And so we're quite proud of the fact that we've been able to do that by showing you a range of information that loads quite quickly in your browser. In fact, when you load this same data, it actually runs and performs a whole lot faster than the old previous version of the MiWater product. So we've kind of been able to have our cake and eat it. We've been able to improve the functionality by having more information available to you, but at the same time we've been able to improve the speed. So we're quite proud of that. On the home dashboard, the aspects or the parts of the dashboard are broken into what we call panels. So little chunks of information scattered across the screen. In the top left here, we have a new panel, and it shows you that the most recently used properties, or the most recently searched properties. When you're using the Aqualus water product in order to solve particular problems, maybe you've got a customer on the phone, you go and investigate something relating to their property or their water consumption, then the MiWater Aqualus water product is going to track which ones you're using individually, personally as a user, and it will show you those as the most recently used ones. So that in the event that you then go and want to come back to that same property that you were using before, you can do that quite easily up in the top left here. So there's 3 different properties up here, which are properties which I've recently searched for and selected. So as we keep doing different searches and looking for different properties and selecting them, they'll all appear up here and just rotate through. And if you were to log into a different computer, that would still remember the ones that you were using as a unique to you as a user. But of course, different users will see different things in that space. The second thing we'll show under here is this panel shows us what we would call warnings. Now, in the previous version of the MiWater product, you may remember we had the top 5 leaks and the top 5 highest water consumers. Well, this is very much the same thing. Instead of showing you a bunch of them though, we do show you a limited number, either 3 or 5. In this case, we've just configured this to show only 3. But it shows us, in this case, a number of different items which we can just select by either using the numbers or scrolling from left to right. So the very first one are the highest consumers for the last 48 hours. The next option shows us the top general leaks, which means that's irrespective of them being residential consumption or non-residential consumption. And the very last one, which is actually a new report, shows the biggest general increases in water consumption. So in this particular case, the top one here, in the last 7 days, this particular property's water consumption has increased by 2,700%. There are a few business rules around that so that you don't get sort of false positives showing up there, which relate to properties that have got zero consumption that increase by even a small amount, so we don't have errors in those calculations. You'll notice that it does also show or say general consumption. Now, one thing that we've also added to this release of Aqualus water is it is now possible for you to now categorize either a meter installation or the property type to include the consumption type being things like whether it's residential or non-residential consumption. So you could even add multiple categories. You could have commercial consumption, or you could have raw water or recycled water consumption if they are different categories. So there is some configuration to do that. When we release the product to all MiWater users this coming week, we aren't going to configure that functionality just yet, but it is there behind the scenes, and it is possible to turn that extra configuration on so that you can do some of these reports and show them instead by separating residential versus non-residential or rural consumption, depending on how you as a water utility have your instance configured. So each of these items, and this is no different from the previous version of MiWater, you can select any of these options and it will drill down and show that property dashboard. But I'm not going to show you the property dashboard just yet. Let's have a look at some of these other items which are on here. The top right is what we call a space. It's a panel that shows a number of different charts, and in this particular case it's showing you a network chart for yesterday's water consumption. This chart actually existed in the previous version of MiWater, but in Aqualus Water, what we've done as part of this release is we've now actually broken it down in different flavors, I suppose, on that chart, and those are the water schemes that have been configured for your instance. So if you have multiple schemes, in your configured for your instance of MiWater, and in Aqualus Water in this release, you'll actually see them just stacked together. So you can sort of differentiate which are the schemes which are consuming the most water yesterday. You'll see that actually occur for a number of the charts that we're about to show you. Just as the other sections over here, we can jump to different versions of the chart in this panel by using these numbers down below, or we can just scroll left from right, or we can use this little down arrow button which will allow you to select the variant that you want to use. But let's just do a quick scroll through them, and a number of these are actually going to be brand new and never having been seen before. So in this particular case, this instance of the Aqualus water product has been configured with a small number of DMAs, which is district metered areas. And if you have a district metered area configured within MiWater, these will all appear in Aqualus water when it's released. However, if you haven't got those yet and you're interested in how that works, DMAs are used as part of a networking reporting tool so that you can work out what water went into a DMA and what water has been consumed by the water meters inside it. And using that, we can do mass balancing and that sort of stuff. And we can usually configure any type of DMAs with different sub-DMAs or downstream DMAs, and we can figure all those business rules in here. It's one of the most powerful parts of the Aqualus water product, to be perfectly honest, but not all of our customers are using it. So we'd love to be able to spend some time just showing you how to unlock that functionality. In this particular case, it's just simply showing us that for Shelbyville as a DMA, that it currently has a 59% loss based on the last 7 days. So that's interesting, but what we'll find with any of these charts is that if you were to click on this chart, it will take you straight to that section, take you straight to that DMA so you can start to analyze it. That includes the one we see here. That includes any of the variants we see. If you see your mouse pointing over something, you can click on it and it will actually take you straight into that data. So there's a lot of brand new drill down functionality. We'll keep going to the next variant we see here. This is a similar chart, but now it's just simply showing you total consumption per suburb. So if you've got 55 suburbs, then you'll see 55 different names showing you here. And when that might occur, if there's a lot of information, one of the benefits of this particular release of Aqualus Water is that any of these charts you see there's actually a maximize button at the top right, and if you click on that you can now see the whole chart in full screen mode. So we'll just close that one. The next version we see here shows you suburb total comparison. That's just a stacked chart, so that doesn't show anything different to the previous one in this instance of MiWater. And we see comparative analysis per meter. So here we can see that the Springfield, I think it's actually Springfield Harbour, is using more water per meter than say Springfield itself. Again, this is the yesterday's water usage, which we showed you before. And one of the things we just said was that if you put your mouse over here, it does show you the details for each of the items which are shown in the chart. But if you were to click on that item, it will actually take you to another report which will detail all of that data. So you could find out, for example, that if your lowest water consumption is occurring around about this time, which is 3:15 AM, then by clicking on that dot point, you'll be able to go and see which water meters are contributing to that consumption at night time. So let's just progress to the next variant, and this variant will show us the totals of all the consumption that has occurred over the last 60 days. This chart again did exist in the previous version of MiWater, but in Aqualus Water it's now showing you each of the schemes have been stacked, and the yellow line that's here, which also existed on the previous chart, is showing you the historic average. So it would allow you to compare consumption on the 30th of March 2019 to the consumption on the 30th of March 2020. So we've got one more variant here, and because our demonstration data isn't quite perfect, this report isn't showing you realistic looking information, but this is actually a new chart which shows you over the last 60 days the total number of leaks that have been recorded in your system. Again, for any of these reports, you can drill down and click on each one of these items to see what those leaks were on a specific day. And this is very useful if you're trying to keep track not only of the number of people who are being told that they have a leak through notifications, but to actually identify how you're going in overall reducing the number of leaks. So the next section underneath this chart is a new panel which shows us what we've sort of called activity. And whereas the top charts really relate to consumption type metrics or metrics which are coming from the underlying AMR data, the next chart really is focusing on things like the use of the Aqualus Water product itself and the things that staff are doing in it in order to maintain your smart meter network. So let's just have a quick look at these activity charts. The first one just simply shows you over the last 60 days how many notifications are being generated by the Aqualus Water product. And that will be of any type. Our data that we actually see here doesn't show us anything interesting, again, because it is demonstration data and isn't going to be as relevant as the data that you'll have in your own implementation of Aqualus Water. But it will show you different types of alerts based on whether they're leaks, whether they're high consumption, and that sort of thing. So that's useful to know how you're going in terms of sending notifications, and that could include the customer portal as well. The next variant we see here is data processing. So in Aqualus Water, we receive data from your companion data system, which might be something like Civica Authority, or might be Technology One, or all those sorts of products. And when you are sending that data into the system, this is simply going to show you how that data is being processed. And just gives you an indication on the home page that data is being received from those systems. The next option we see here is very similar to the one above actually, but these are the total number of meters with leaks over the last 60 days. And again, we can drill down on this to see which of the 73 meters currently listed there has a leak. The next one is the completed meter and AMR Advisors. Again, we don't see too much interesting here, but this is quite useful when you're doing a rollout of smart metering across your water utilities area. And it will allow you to see, well, what a contractor's doing, because as new water meters and AMRs are being replaced or installed, then you'll see those transactions actually completed here, and you'll see how many are being done per day. And of course, you can drill down and see what they actually are. So that's quite useful, especially during rollouts, but even when you're in maintenance mode, when all you're trying to do is just maintain your fleet of smart meters, and that may still mean that you need to go and replace some because they've been damaged or all that sort of stuff. You'll still see those advices or the transactions that are occurring here over the last 60 days. So the next variant that we see are the number of completed physical meter readings. So even with the advices that we just mentioned before, they will potentially be getting completed on the MiWater mobile device, mobile application, and in the same way, physical meter readings can also be completed on the device. No doubt that will also be rebranded to Aqualus Water very soon, but nothing really changes there as far as functionality is concerned. If you're using the mobile application to supplement your smart meter readings with physical readings, or even to do audits, then all of that can still be completed, whether it's one at a time or through a batch process. But as they are completed, you'll actually see them appear here. So you'll be able to get an indication of what transactions are occurring through meter reading out in the field particularly, and you'll see them here, and can drill down and select them if you want to. This is more of an indication of water meters that have devices attached to them, or maybe they're integrated meters from which you're currently receiving no reports. So over the last 60 days, you can see specific devices. Now you'll also see that at the moment, this one is just showing you one single vendor, but we have a number of implementations of Aqualus Water across Australia that have multiple vendors. I think the largest we have is maybe 4 or 5 different vendors supplying data into the system. And that's why you would see there each of those vendors just stacked one on top of the other. And you'd be able to drill down and see what's going on with those meters, or at least see which meters they are that are currently not providing data. And there's a number of reasons why that can occur. It's different per technology type and per manufacturer, but this just gives you an overview of what's happening out in the field. At the moment, this demonstration data is not the most reliable, but this gives you an indication. If you've got a large number of meters in this state, then that really needs to be corrected, because you've potentially got meters that you can't do billing for, and meters that customers can't receive alerts for, because as soon as you have the data start to disappear, then that functionality starts to disappear with it. In this variant, we'll see the number of meters with zero consumption over the last period of time. Again, this is functionality that existed before, but we're now showing it to you as a chart, so you can try and work out over time which meters, or the number of meters which currently are reporting no consumption. And if that's in an increasing trend, maybe that's indicative of things like seasonality in your network where people are going on holidays, or it could be an indication that you've got a very old fleet of water meters with tags attached to them, and the tags are now reporting zeros because those water meters are starting to fail. So that's something to be aware of as well. The last variant we see here are currently meters that are flagged for investigation. So it is possible within the system to be able to flag a meter for investigation, which doesn't do a whole lot other than just mark it so that you can search by that specifically, or in this particular case, you'll see it appear on a chart. But this does also give you a quick way to identify how many are currently flagged, and also to drill down and see which ones they are. As we just scroll down a little bit further, we'll also see on the left-hand side here, we have a new panel which we've called cards. Now, the cards is really trying to give you an indication of some important single numbers for important metrics. Some of those metrics are actually the same ones we just saw over here in the activities chart, but also trying to give you a bit of a visual indicator by way of color. So just to quickly mention what they are. So there's meter readings with exceptions. So that's functionality that already exists where a physical reading has been done which is out of whack with the calculated reading that's coming through the Aqualus Water system, which can be caused by a range of different things, which is probably a webinar all in itself to explain that process. But you can drill down and have a look at those by clicking on this card. The one next to it is the number of quarantine meters. Again, that's a process where we identify interesting data in the stream of data that comes from a water meter, so much so that we decide that there's something potentially wrong either with the data or with the meter itself, and we'll put that into a state of quarantine. Again, another process that's been there for some time in the Aqualus Water product, but we won't spend too much time on here. Of course, we again see here zero consumption. So at the moment, there are 91 water meters that are reporting zero consumption over the last 30 days. We see that there's 0 meters flagged for investigation, and that's why it's currently coded green. There are presently 10 meter or AMR advice errors. So that's a new sort of number that's not on one of those charts. But when you're doing a large number of water meter advices, maybe to replace water meters and install tags or install integrated meters, then that process can generate an error where maybe the mobile device has been used for that process, and then the data which has come from mobile into the Aqualus water product is actually reporting an error, maybe because the meter code was wrong, or maybe the meter reading was wrong, or maybe the GPS coordinates are missing. Those sorts of things put it into a state of an advice error. So when that occurs, you can see that number here is actually 10, and again, you can drill down on those and see what they are. Number of or no reports received in the last 7 days is I guess another version of one of these other charts. We can see that there are currently 60 meters with a leak, and there's also been 0 notifications sent for the last few days. So the last thing that's on the home dashboard here is our new map reporting panel. Now I'll just go to the first variant that we see here, and the first variant will give you the general consumption across your water utility per meter by suburb, and we see a color coding here. So we bring in all of the suburb geography or geometry information from public sources, and also have used that to color code the results. So again, this is sample data. It's really not accurate enough to make any kind of decisions about with relation to Mackay. But the data that we can see here will show you the number of meters which are within this suburb, shows you the 7-day usage, the usage per meter per day, and an indication of data quality, which is data continuity. And when you open this up for yourselves on your instance, then you'll immediately be able to see this very similar color coding process. Now, consumption by suburb sometimes isn't necessarily the best way to be able to cut or divide up each of the sections of your network. So the next version will show the same information, but now show it to you as a DMA. Now, if you haven't got DMAs configured, again, you won't see this version of the map at all. But if you do, then this allows you to be able to compare DMAs. In this particular case, it's not just showing you consumption from a comparison point of view, but it's actually showing you representative mass balance. So in this case, this particular one has no inflow but 167 kiloliters of consumption, so that's not too bad. They're actually making water. In this particular case though, we've got 3.9 megaliters going in for the last 7 days, and only 1.7 megaliters have been consumed. So we have a fairly significant loss here of 56%. So where you have your DMAs configured, by putting it into these, this map variant allows you to get a very quick overview of what's happening across your network. The next variant we see here, again, is a mass balance type report, but it's just showing you comparative change over the last 7 days. So how has the mass balance changed? And unless you're using the DMA functionality, some of these reports might not be all that useful for you, but if you are, this just again gives you an indication by color that some of these DMAs have had significant change over the last period of time. So that brings us to the end of the home dashboard functionality. And so the next thing we really like to show you is the property dashboard. So the property dashboard functionality is more, more similar to what the current MiWater property dashboard has. Again, but there's been a significant styling change. Now, what we would like to do in here is we want to do a search, simulate a search that you might perform yourselves. So I want to go to and find a property which I know is at 265 Industrial Way. Oops. So we'll press that. It hasn't even brought the search results up because there's only one successful result there. And in this version, this is the new Aqualus Water Property Dashboard. Some parts may look familiar and others may not. But at the top left here, we have details of the assessment or the property information. On the top right, we see metrics. So they were there before in slightly different formatting. But what is new is we now actually see here any active meters in its own little panel here. And in this particular case, there are 3 meters configured. You'll actually see a large number of meters here with a scroll, so you don't have to sort of drill down into the property to find the specific meter that you're interested in. So we've brought that more to the front. You'll also see represented here if there are any alerts like a leak, or if it's been flagged for investigation, or the tag's been quarantined. You'll actually see all of those icons visible here. Maybe we'll show you one of those a little bit later on. We see a representation here of the current reading that you would expect on the dial of the meter, and also see a representation of the data quality. As we scroll down here, the next thing that we see is the water consumption chart, or the raw data chart. Now, this chart existed in some form in the previous version in MiWater, but it was very limited. Firstly, it was limited to the number of water meters that it could show in the same chart. And secondly, it was actually limited to only 48 hours of data being shown at the same time. That's been completely changed. As you can see here, firstly, even though there's only 3 being represented here on this chart, we can see at least 10 here. There's no theoretical limit to the number that we can show here, but it does start getting quite busy once you put a lot of meters against your property. But in addition to that, we can actually hide the ones that we don't want to see by selecting them through the map legend over the right here. But we can also show you more than 48 hours. In fact, at the moment we're showing you only 48 hours, but we can change these dates, and now we're looking at the same series of data, but now we're looking at over 6 days. And we can keep changing that just to sort of, prove that point of the improvements we've made to that charting control. And when we are looking at this amount of data, admittedly it does get complex, which is why each of these charts are able to also be expanded to full screen, and it will allow you to also download the data from the chart using this control here. So we'll just close this chart, and we can see now, in addition to raw data being shown, we can also change to the other variant of this chart, which is the number of litres used per minute. And that did exist also in MiWater, but it was quite hard to find unless you knew where you were looking. So that's now available here. The shape of the chart doesn't actually change. It's simply showing you now in terms of litres per minute for each of these data points. And so that can be quite useful in being able to identify or analyse certain issues for a specific water meter. So that is the raw data chart, and as we scroll down a little bit further, we now see the water consumption chart. And this chart really takes the job of the 5 charts that were previously on the MiWater property dashboard. We've merged all of those into one super chart, I suppose you could say. And this chart is able to show different periods of time. It's able to show you each of the meters independently if you want to, as well as a number of other interesting things. So the first thing we'll just quickly show is that we can change this to show by cost. So if you have your tariffs configured, you can see this represented as cost as well, but we'll leave it to show the consumption by litres. We can change here. At the moment we're showing you the period of report is daily, but we can change this to hourly for the same time series, or weekly, monthly, all those things. We can also show you a representation of data quality. So that existed in some form as well before. At the moment, we're receiving all the data we expect from all of the water meters which are at this property. But if you see declines in data quality, it simply means that you would expect more transmissions to have been received or reports to be received from those water meters. So that can sometimes just be an indication that you need to investigate something. Another thing that we can show here, not that it will do too much for the one that we're looking at, because the two other water meters up the top here, I don't think are actually having any consumption. But we can show each of these water meters one on top of the other. So this is stacked. So where you've got a property with lots of meters, you can see all of their consumption stacked across the board as well. We can change the dates here. So at the moment we're looking at hourly, and you may remember that the hourly charts in MiWater were typically limited to to a maximum of 2 weeks. So we can just prove that that's no longer an issue. We're now going back to about 8 weeks, and we can keep going further back. Of course, the further broader period of time that you go, more data is being displayed here, which is why it's quite useful to use this slider control. So if we're actually interested in this period of time here, which is somewhere around April 18th, then we can actually use this control just to zoom in on that section, just to see what's going on. Some new functionality that we've added to this chart is that if this particular property has a leak, we will actually be able to see that represented not just now, as in is there a leak right now, but we can actually see that represented historically. So we see that there's an extra button down below here which says leak. So as we click on that, we actually now see a red line on our chart, and that red line is actually an indication of the consumption that's occurring at this property that we've identified as being a leak. And it means that as a proportion of total consumption, you can actually see the size of a leak. So just as we could before, we can also maximize this chart. We can also download this data to a CSV spreadsheet. As we scroll a little bit further, these panels are quite similar to what was there before in the previous version of the MiWater system. We've just restyled them. There's a little bit of extra information shown in this panel, which is the history of changes to water meters or AMRs relating to this property. So you can see when something was physically last changed. We can also see that the map itself has been slightly changed from what it was using before. It was previously using a Google Maps API, whereas we're now using something different. So a few style difference changes there, but nothing really to speak of in terms of functionality. Lastly, on the property dashboard is just to mention that over the top right here, we still have an operations menu which will allow you to record a customer communication, which is useful to record something like a leak notification or something like that, as well as links to change some of the data that's in here. If that's been turned on for your instance and you've got the functionality turned on that allows you to change companion data, then this will take you straight to those respective sections. But what we'd like to show next is that in addition to the property dashboard, one of the most frequently used parts of the product actually is the panels that were always coming up showing you information about specific meters. And so the last part that we'll show you as part of this demonstration is that you can actually drill down in here, and rather than showing you a fairly small little pop-up control, we now have a fairly comprehensive modal that's just showing you all of the details for both the water meter on the left-hand side and the AMR on the right-hand side. So I'll just go through all of this. Now, all this information was there before. You just had to know where to look. But rather than make it difficult for you, we wanted to put it all in one spot so it all made a lot more sense. The first thing we'll just quickly show, the left-hand side at the top section here are the details of the meter, and the section on the right are the details of the AMR. Of course, you'll have some situations where the water meter might not have an AMR, in which case there's nothing shown on the right-hand side at all. You'll also see at the top right-hand side here the operations menu, and it has an option here to modify the meter advice or the AMR advice. And that's new functionality just to simply link you back to existing functionality, where previously you may have had to do a search to try and actually change the underlying advice which controls some of these things. You can also go straight from here to manage or change the meter readings, as well as flagging for investigation and to add a zero consumption event. All of those things are actually also available down below here in the form, which we'll get to in a moment. The left-hand side showing you the information about the meter includes if it's deactivated or not, rate types if that's been configured, what the type icon is, if it's a billing meter or if it's a trade waste meter, or if you're using trade waste meters, or if it's a network meter. All those sorts of things are represented here. On the right-hand side, again, we see the timestamp for when it was activated. If there's some text descriptions for things about its position, it'll show that there. The rate per pulse is shown, as well as the first report and the currently determined reading for that as of this point in time. Scrolling down a little bit further, this is where we are able to flag this water meter for investigation, or this AMR for investigation. Clicking on that just brings up a form that allows you to say, I am flagging this meter with a comment. We save that, and now it's been saved. And if we were to do a report now for those which have been flagged, this one would now appear. We can of course clear that flag as well and say no longer flag, and we can save that there. Below that, we also have zero consumption events. These existed in the previous version of MiWater, but we have improved the functionality in terms of how it's laid out. And a zero consumption event is not the event of the actual zero consumption. It's an event where you've recorded that you have investigated the event and determined that it to be acceptable. So maybe the system has recorded zero consumption, you then use that to go and see what's going on. Maybe someone's done a drive-by and you've determined that there's simply no one in the residence. So you can just add that event, and we can say here that as of this date and time, that the outcome, what it was that it was valid zero consumption, and we can record a note. The reason we do this is actually just to try and help you manage the process of investigating zero consumptions, because there are a lot of opportunities to save water, non-revenue water, by managing zero consumption. Because if the issue is actually because this water meter has stopped working and the tag that's attached to it is now reporting zeros, then that's something that needs to be investigated. So this simply allows you to say that this particular water meter is okay, and when you do zero consumption reports in the other section of MiWater and Aqualus Water, you can change the filters to exclude those that have a valid zero consumption event. Okay, so we can just minimize these ones as well if they're things that we don't need to use. The next section shows you all historic readings. So these are actual billing readings or physical readings that have been done. This functionality also existed before, but we've now laid it out a little bit more nicely. And we can see details here. If there's notes, if there's photos that have been taken, we can see these all in the same panel. We can view or manage and change these readings by opening a separate modal that allows you to go and edit. Some of them depends where they've come from. Those business rules haven't changed. But you can also specify a brand new meter reading if you've done that through some sort of manual process. Okay, so back to here, we also see the installation images. We've just made them a little bit more prominent so that the link that's here, you can go and select those. And my demonstration instance of the Aqualus water system doesn't actually have those images behind the scenes, so I can't show them to you. But by clicking on those, that will simply bring them up into a separate window. Lastly, there's a little bit of configuration information here that might have been recorded, whether they're hazards, the GPS position. If you want to specify a leak threshold, then you can do that here. And lastly, in situations where a water meter has been assigned to multiple assessments, you'll see all of those details listed here. And you can go straight from there to each of the different assessments by clicking on this icon. So that's fine. So we'll just want to close this modal and return back to the property dashboard. There are a small number of other changes in here. There's a couple of other modal controls like the customer list, which has also been changed, but the functionality is really very much the same as it was before. So we won't really go into that. We're quite confident that as you start to use the new styling in Aqualus Water, that you'll become quite familiar with it very quickly. It really does follow the same design patterns that we have already had in place in the MiWater product for a number of years. And we're quite confident as well, though, that you'll see a bunch of brand new functionality, new ways of being able to access the data that's in the system, new ways of being able to determine or find insights in the data that's there. So that concludes our demonstration of the version 10.1 or the release 10.1 of the Aqualus Water product. I hope that as we've seen here that whilst there are a lot of functionality changes from a user perspective in terms of how things are styled, that the data that we're looking at there is still the same data that you have already. It's just being revealed to you in a new and hopefully more useful way. And in addition to that, you hopefully will find that whilst the user interface around menus and where to find things might be slightly different to what you're familiar with, we really do expect that you should pick that up fairly quickly. It is our hope and our goal through this process that we continue to innovate the Aqualus Water product And especially as we start to push into international markets, which is an exciting thing for a homegrown Australian product to be doing, that as we push into those markets, that there'll be new opportunities, new improvements to the product that we'll be adding in, which will benefit everyone who is currently using the product and anyone who's currently interested in using the product in the future. So in terms of engaging with us, there is a Taggle user group community through LinkedIn, which you can connect with to give suggestions, or if you want to have inquiries about the product in terms of what benefits it can have for you in your water utility. And we haven't covered a lot of those benefits. We're really just showing you what's changed. When we typically do a training process for the MiWater, for the Aqualus water product, that can often take a number of days. So there's just so much there to be able to cover, and so much more that we'd love to be able to talk to you and show you. So just make contact with Mark Anglaro. Myself, or one of the other sales team will be glad to give you a bit of a demonstration, to talk about the benefits of the Aqualus water product. That applies not just for users of the Taggle radio network, but also for anyone across Australia, and all the different versions of smart metering and AMRs that exist across Australia. So if you have any further questions, feel free to ask them, and I hope that you enjoy the release when it's made in the next week. Thank you.